In this video, I want to show you what we are watching for the rest of this year and into next before it becomes obvious in the headlines. Now, the bigger risk isn't some apocalyptic collapse or one dramatic event everyone can point to. Any one of these could become serious, but the more likely risk is that several systems become less reliable at the same time. Energy, food, inflation, weather, cyber attacks, insurance, public trust, and basic services. They're all connected. And when pressure builds across several of them at the same time, daily life can get more expensive, less reliable, and harder to navigate. Get the free city prepping brief and stay one step ahead of the events shaping our future. Each week, I share the risk I'm watching and the practical steps you can take now to prepare. Sign up for free at cityprepping.com/CPB or use the link below. If you're new to this channel, my name is Chris, and on this channel, we discuss emergency preparedness, aka prepping. Over the years, we have used these Outlook videos to prepare our audience about the kinds of pressure points that often show up before the headlines catch up. Zoonotic diseases, supply chain fragility, food pressure, cyber attacks, fuel and labor strain, weather volatility, utility weaknesses, inflation, digital disruption, and civil tensions. The exact events have not always materialized in the worst-case scenarios, but the pressure points have largely been the right ones. And thankfully, not every risk reached its most extreme version. But we were right about the direction of many of them. From the severe disruptions that changed daily life to the quieter pressures that made life more expensive, less predictable, and harder to manage. Now, the goal is not to predict every event perfectly. The goal is to recognize pressures early enough to prepare before it hits closer to home. So, let me walk you through the 8 pressure points building underneath the surface of daily life. And these problems are not going to stay in their own lanes. Energy pressure moves into food. Food moves into inflation. And inflation moves into household stress. Weather and cyber attacks will add pressure on systems already stretched thin. So, the warning may not be one obvious national emergency. It could be that daily life will get more expensive and less reliable. Here are the 8 things we should be watching closely for the rest of this year. Energy shock. The first thing I'm watching is energy, not just because people notice gas prices. Energy is the input behind nearly every household cost. It moves food, powers warehouses, runs farm equipment, supports fertilizer production, moves ships, runs factories, keeps hospitals operating, and it keeps homes livable during extreme heat. When energy gets more expensive or more volatile, that pressure rapidly moves into groceries, utilities, repairs, insurance, shipping, and manufacturing. The part a lot of people miss is that energy markets operate on a delay. Whether a disruption escalates, stabilizes, or is eventually resolved, the effects on supplies, shipping routes, insurance costs, refinery schedules, and energy infrastructure can linger for months or even years. U.S. oil and ELG still move in the global markets to fill the contracts and chase global demand. So, American production does not fully shield American households from international pressure. For the rest of this year, you may still see a few dimes come off gas or a bump in the stock market if tensions cool. But I would still expect utility bills, grocery prices, and energy-linked household costs to remain high, and they could move higher if any other disruption hits before the system rebuilds real margin. Climate whiplash. The second thing I'm watching is what I call climate whiplash, especially the growing signals of a potentially strong El Niño. And this is not simply more rain in California or warmer and drier winter in other regions. The bigger issue is volatility. El Niño does not remove water risk. It redistributes it. Agriculture, roads, reserves, power grids, insurance models, and emergency services. They all depend on weather staying within expected ranges. And when those patterns swing harder, the stress moves into food, utilities, transportation, insurance, and local services. And this is what we need to understand as we go into the rest of this year next. Too much rain at the wrong time can delay planting or harvesting. It can damage roads, spread crop diseases, increase pest pressure, and interrupt transportation. Too little rain can reduce yields, raise fire. Danger, stress reserves, and increase power demand. When you hear El Niño or Super El Niño, brace for rapid shifts between extremes and a significant reduction in reliable patterns. So when this El Niño pattern strengthens as current signals suggest, expect weather volatility to show up indirectly through food prices, insurance costs, utility strain, road and property damage, delayed repairs, and local disruptions that take longer to recover than most people expect. Food pressure. The third thing I'm watching is food pressure. And I want to be clear that this does not mean grocery stores are about to be empty everywhere. Most modern food disruptions, they don't start that way. They usually show up first as higher prices, fewer choices, smaller packages, lower quality, slower restocking, or certain items becoming less reliable. If you wait until the shelves are empty to take food seriously, you waited too long. The deeper issue is that food pressure is not only about how much food is grown. It is about whether farmers can afford fertilizer, diesel, labor, equipment, feed, financing, water, and insurance. It depends on the weather cooperating and transportation staying reliable, processors having enough capacity, and disruptions from cyber attacks, global instability, disease or parasites staying contained. A full grocery store is still sitting at top of fragile supply chain because availability is not the same as stability. And that's why I keep coming back to the grocery bill. No report is going to tell you more than your shopping receipt in your hand. The concern for the rest of this year is not just crop failure or even specific threats like screwworm driving up beef prices. It is a margin failure. A bad harvest matters more when input costs are already high like they are now. A transportation disruption matters more when fuel is volatile as it has been lately. A cyber attack matters more when processors are a stretch. So for the rest of this year and into next, you can expect food pressure to show up less as obviously empty shelves and more as higher prices, thinner selection, lower quality, smaller packages, and scattered shortages that make a deep pantry more valuable than many people realize. Inflation wave. Now, the fourth thing I'm watching is inflation's second wave. And I don't mean that only in the official economic sense. The headline number may say one thing while your household experiences something very different. A national average can smooth out the pain and hide what families are actually feeling in food, fuel, rent, utilities, insurance, repairs, medical costs, car payments, property taxes, and debt service. Your household does not experience inflation as a chart. You experience it when the same monthly routine costs more than it used to. And that's why I would not separate inflation too sharply from the other issues. Inflation is a consequence running through many of them. Energy volatility feeds inflation because transportation, manufacturing, farming, and utilities, they all depend on energy. Food pressure feeds inflation because basic staples touch every household. Weather disasters feed inflation because repairs, insurance claims, rebuilding, and local service demands, they all become more expensive. Cyber disruptions can feed inflation if they interrupt logistics, healthcare payments, food processing, or local government operations. The deeper question is not whether inflation moves up or down by a point in a report. The deeper question is what parts of your household budget are exposed to systems that you don't control. So, for the rest of this year and into next, expect the official numbers of matter less than your actual bills. Some costs may dip, but the overall pressure on the household budget is still likely to trend higher through the rest of this year. Even if inflation looks better on paper, many households will still feel even more squeezed by food, utilities, insurance, rent, repairs, and debt. Which means preparedness now has to include cutting waste, building cash margin, reducing dependency, and locking in essentials before they become more expensive. Trust breakdown. The fifth thing I'm watching, and this may end up being the biggest this year, is a further breakdown in public trust. The issue is not just who wins an election. The issue is whether people believe the result, trust the process, trust the information they're receiving, and believe institutions are acting honestly. That matters because when trust breaks down, people become harder to inform, harder to calm, and harder to coordinate during a crisis. Each election for the last decade has proven to be more contentious than the last, and there are more accusations of fraud, more institutional suspicion, and more people primed to believe the worst. And this has led to such a breakdown in public trust that even this midterm, with the balance of Congress in play, it could end up being the most contentious election cycle yet. When trust breaks down, frustration does not always stay online. We've already seen it spill into the streets, state capitals, voting centers, school board meetings, courtrooms, and even state capitals and the U.S. Capitol. And that is a concern for the rest of this year. A contested result, a viral video, a court ruling, a police incident, or even a rumor can move much faster than the facts when people already believe the system is dishonest. A society can handle disagreement, but it becomes far more fragile when large groups no longer agree on what is real, who can be trusted, whether the process is itself legitimate. Add AI-generated content, political fatigue, financial pressure, job insecurity, and local flashpoints. And the risk, it's not about disagreement. The risk is now that frustration turns into disruption, intimidation, or unrest. So, for the rest of this year and into next, you can expect public trust to become one of the most hidden stress points behind national and local instability. And that stress point could sharpen quickly as we move toward the November elections. Now, I'm not saying every community is going to see unrest or that every dispute or accusation of wrongdoing will become a crisis, but the margin for calm will be thinner in many places. That means preparedness is not just food and water. It is situational awareness, avoiding tense areas, verifying information before acting, having alternate routes, keeping enough supplies at home, and becoming the kind of steady person others can trust when the noises get louder. Cyber threats. Now, the sixth thing I'm watching is cyber threats, especially against critical infrastructure. Iran, Russia, North Korea, China, and criminal ransomware groups have all been tied to cyber pressure against U.S. systems. And that threat is likely to grow even when direct military tensions cool. The cyber attack that matters to your household may not be the one that steals your password. It may be the one that interrupts a service you depend on, such as water, healthcare, payments, food distribution, ports, pipelines, utilities, pharmacies, fuel suppliers, local government offices, and especially election-adjacent systems. That is the shift. Cyber risk is no longer just a personal technology problem. It is now an infrastructure problem. And it matters more now because many of these systems are already stretched thin. A household under staffing pressure is more vulnerable when its systems go down. A water utility with aging infrastructure is more vulnerable when controls or communications are disrupted. A food processor operating within thin margins is far more vulnerable when ransomware stops production. Your household, it may feel the disruption even if your personal accounts were never touched. So for the rest of this year and into next, expect cyber attacks to keep showing up as real-world service disruptions rather than just online annoyances. That means your preparedness needs a low-tech layer, some cache, printed documents, written phone numbers, offline maps, backup power, stored water, and a way to communicate if digital systems are down or overloaded. And that's not paranoia. It is redundancy for a world where more of daily life depends on systems that you can't control. Insurance crisis. Now, the seventh thing that I'm watching is insurance and affordability. Now, this may not sound like a traditional preparedness topic, but it is becoming one of the biggest household stability issues in the country. A disaster doesn't have to hit your house directly to make your life less stable. Sometimes the costs of repeated disasters show up later as higher premiums, larger deductibles, reduced coverage, insurer withdrawals, rent increases, mortgage pressure, repair costs, and fewer affordable places to live. That is the delayed consequences that many people miss. A hurricane, wildfire, flood, or hailstorm may hit one region. But the cost of that risk, it doesn't always stay there. Rebuilding costs? They rise. Insurers change their models. Some companies pull back from high-risk areas. Homeowners are pushed into more expensive or less comprehensive coverage. Landlords face higher costs, and renters eventually fill it through higher rent. Even if your home is never damaged, the cost of living around rising risk will still reach your household. So, for the rest of this year and into next, expect insurance and housing costs to keep acting like hidden inflation. Premiums, deductibles, exclusions, rent, repairs, and temporary housing costs can all become pressure points after a disaster, even for people who thought they were prepared. That means preparedness has to include the financial side of recovery. Review your coverage, know what your policy excludes, document your possession, store key records, harden your property where you can, and keep some emergency cash, because surviving the event is only the first part. Reliability crisis. Now, the final thing I'm watching is an emerging reliability crisis, because this is what ties everything together. The system may not collapse. It may just become more expensive, less dependable, and harder to navigate. And that is what many households are already feeling. Your repair, it takes longer. The part is backorder. The utility restoration estimate changes. The medicine is temporarily unavailable. The insurance claim drags on. The grocery item costs more, comes in a smaller package, or disappears for a few weeks. None of that means the system is failed. But together, it means that the margin is thinning. And that is the deeper meaning behind the rest of this year. Energy has less slack. Food has less slack. Household budgets have less slack. Utilities, insurance markets, supply chains, local governments and public trusts, they have all less slack than people assume. And when systems have margin, they can absorb shocks. When systems lose margin, smaller shocks create bigger consequences. And the household has to absorb more of the disruption. The point of focusing on these 8 pressure points is not to make you anxious or to try to convince you that every one of them is going to become a crisis. Any one of them could, but the point you need to understand is that they are connected. On this channel, we're not about wallowing in doom and gloom. We're about taking steps now to lessen the pain later. The bigger point is that all 8 of these pressures we're going to feel for the rest of this year are intricately connected and compounding on each other. Energy pressure can raise food and utility costs. Weather volatility can hit crops, roads, insurance, and power systems. Food pressure and inflation can squeeze households until one extra bill becomes a serious problem. Public distrust can turn normal tensions into disruption. Cyber attacks can take stress systems offline. Insurance costs can make recovery harder, even for families who never see direct damage. And when all of that happens against a system with less margin, daily life can become more expensive, less reliable, and harder to navigate before most people understand why. And that is a pattern that we are tracking. That is also why waiting for certainty is the wrong strategy. By the time one of these problems becomes obvious in the headlines, prices may already be higher, supplies may already be tighter, tempers may already be hotter, and your options may already be fewer. Preparedness. It's not about knowing the future perfectly. It's about recognizing pressures early enough to act while the shelves are still stocked, the roads are still open, the lights are still on, and you can still make calm decisions. Add food before the panic cycle. Store water before the outage. Review insurance before the claim. Keep cash before the payment system fails. Build margin before the system forces you to. So, keep paying attention now. Act on the small things now. And if you want to stay ahead of these pressure points before they rise to a critical level, subscribe to this channel and sign up for the City Prepping Brief through the links pinned below this video. And that's where we're going to keep watching these signals, keep connecting them for your household and showing you what they mean before they become obvious to everyone. So, you don't have to fix the whole world, you just have to make your corner of it more resilient. Now, if you want to dig deeper and see how accurate our forecasts have really been, take a look at our video on our top 10 threats we're going to face in 2026. We're right on target with 9 of them. Also, check out our deeper dive into this emerging food crisis before it gets worse. I'll link to both of these videos in the description comment section below and here on the side of the screen. As always, stay safe out